The danger of seeing what others don't. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. But what happens when that privilege comes with a price? In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore the hidden cost of seeing what others can't. A gift that often feels more like a burden than a blessing. If you've ever felt like you were born into a world that misunderstands your depth, your intuition, or your clarity, this message is for you. Carl Jung understood the pain of being awake in a world that prefers sleep. Are you someone who sees through the masks, hears what isn't said, and feels what others hide? If so, leave a comment below. I see beyond the surface, and I embrace my truth. Let's begin this powerful journey together. 1. You perceive reality at a rare and dangerous depth. You don't just look at people, you look through them. While others are distracted by appearances, your soul cuts through the illusion and sees the truth that hides behind performance. You feel when someone is smiling to mask anxiety, laughing to avoid crying, or talking too much to distract from the silence they fear. Your perception doesn't stop at behavior. It penetrates to the emotional root, to the energetic frequency that others unconsciously emit. Carl Jung understood this rare psychological ability as a soul's capacity to perceive the unconscious, not just in the self, but in others. And yet, this vision, while profound, carries a hidden price: isolation. Because when people feel seen at the level of their fears, contradictions, and suppressed wounds, they either retreat or attack. Not because you're wrong, but because the mirror you hold is too honest for their comfort. And so, the more clearly you see, the more alone you feel, not due to a lack of connection, but because your soul can no longer engage in surface-level illusions. You begin to realize that pretending not to see is often more exhausting than the seeing itself. You walk through rooms, feeling waves of energy no one speaks of. You sense the tension between couples who claim everything is fine. You notice the flicker in someone's eyes when they lie, even to themselves. You start to carry a weight that's hard to name: the emotional labor of awareness. Your presence becomes too intense for those still running from their own reflection. Jung warned that to perceive the unconscious too clearly can lead to a kind of spiritual exile, not because you're delusional, but because you're awake in a world that worships sleep. And yet, you try to fit in. You downplay your instincts. You soften your truths. You question your sanity. But deep down, you know your soul is tuned to a deeper frequency. You aren't crazy. You're just clear. And clarity, in a foggy world, looks like rebellion. You don't experience reality the way others do, because your soul isn't here to conform. It's here to witness, to transmute, to elevate. But witnessing darkness doesn't mean you are the darkness. It means your light is strong enough to survive it. Still, this level of sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's an ancient power disguised as fragility. Like a tuning fork, your soul vibrates to what is real, not what is performed. You know when someone says, "I'm fine," but means, "Please don't leave." You hear the sorrow in sarcasm, the fear in anger, the longing in withdrawal. You feel what others don't say, and often what they don't even know about themselves. That's the hidden cost. Not the pain of others, but the pain of seeing it all and not being able to unsee it. Yet, in this suffering lies a sacred purpose. You were not made to join the noise, but to hear what lies beneath it. And while this may cost you comfort, it grants you vision, the soul's vision. Eventually, Your presence will draw those who speak your silent language, who see as you see, feel as you feel. And when those soul-aligned beings arrive, you'll realize the loneliness wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. Not everyone will understand your depth, but the ones who do won't fear it. They'll honor it. Because they too have paid the price of perception. And like you, they've learned to carry truth with grace. Have you ever looked at someone and instantly sensed the truth they were trying to hide? If so, share your story in the comments below. Your insight could help others feel less alone. And if you've never explored this rare depth of perception, comment, "I'm ready to see," so we can walk this eye-opening path together. 2. You're allergic to superficiality. You're not too much. You're just tuned into a frequency most people have never heard. When your soul craves authenticity, depth, and unfiltered truth, the noise of superficial conversation starts to feel unbearable. You sit in rooms filled with chatter and laughter, but you hear what isn't being said. The fear behind the jokes, the sadness behind the eyes, the truth everyone's too scared to speak. Small talk doesn't just bore you, it suffocates you. While others find comfort in the familiar rhythm of shallow connection, you hunger for something that reaches beyond the surface and into the soul. And this hunger, this relentless call for something real, often makes people uncomfortable. They say you're intense or dramatic, when in truth, you're simply awake. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That's the cost of seeing what others can't. You notice the masks they wear, the roles they play, and the desperate effort they put into maintaining illusions. And because you see through it, they project discomfort onto you, calling you too sensitive or too serious, when in fact, it's their own avoidance that's being threatened. Take Maya, for example, a woman working in corporate marketing, where status updates and weekend gossip were the currency of connection. She tried to share something meaningful one day, a thought on how mindfulness could ease the silent burnout she sensed in the room. But her words landed like a thunderclap. The energy shifted, the conversation died, and from that day on, she was seen as the odd one out. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she offered truth in a space addicted to pretending. Her soul could no longer participate in the charade, and that alienated her. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the path of becoming whole, of integrating the conscious and unconscious, of stepping away from the collective identity to uncover your authentic self. This process isn't celebrated, it's often punished. And that's where your pain comes from. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're just carrying a level of self-awareness that makes others question their own. In a world addicted to comfort, your soul is built for transformation. In a society that praises conformity, you are the reminder that truth still matters. So stop apologizing for your depth. Stop diluting your truth just to be accepted by people who fear their own reflection. Seek those rare, courageous souls who won't flinch when you speak of healing, fear, grief, dreams, or death. You don't need to be understood by everyone, just by the ones who speak the language of the soul. Carl Jung warned that the greatest burden a soul must carry is the unlived life. So choose to live yours fully, even if it means standing alone in your truth. because your refusal to be superficial is not a flaw. It's a calling. 3. You absorb others' emotions like a sponge. You feel everything, don't you? You walk into a room and instantly sense the tension behind the smiles, the pain behind the silence, the unspoken stories sitting between every breath. It's not just empathy, it's a spiritual sensitivity that Carl Jung once described as participation mystique, a deep psychological state where the boundaries between your soul and another begin to blur. You don't just observe emotion, you absorb it. Like a sponge, you soak up the unprocessed grief, suppressed anger, and hidden sorrow of those around you. And while this ability may feel like a gift, it quietly comes with a hidden cost: emotional exhaustion, spiritual confusion, and the haunting sense that you no longer know which feelings are truly your own. You find yourself carrying burdens that were never yours to hold, waking up heavy from the dreams of others, drained from energies you can't name. This is the invisible toll of spiritual depth. You become a mirror for others, but lose sight of your own reflection. And because you feel so much, you start to question everything. Is this sadness mine? Why am I anxious when nothing's wrong in my life? Why do I suddenly feel lost after being around certain people? Jung understood this psychic entanglement well. When we are deeply attuned to the unconscious energy of others, especially those who repress their truth, we become unintentional vessels for their spiritual residue. The problem is, society doesn't teach you how to cleanse that kind of energetic weight. It rewards your insight, but ignores your fatigue. It praises your compassion, but leaves you alone to process the aftermath. Over time, the spiritual cost becomes emotional confusion, chronic fatigue, and internal chaos disguised as kindness. It can even distort your self-image, making you believe that you're too sensitive, too weak, or too unstable, when in fact, your soul is simply responding to an overload of unconscious signals from the world around you. This is why solitude becomes sacred for people like you, not to escape others, but to finally hear yourself. Just as Jung wrote, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. That's the truth you must reclaim. In a world addicted to distraction, your inner stillness is revolutionary. You don't need to carry what isn't yours. You don't need to bleed for what others refuse to feel. You need to return to your center, to your own soul, and remember that your sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a compass. It's a spiritual signal that guides you toward truth, connection, and healing, not just for others, but for yourself. So the next time you feel overwhelmed for no reason, pause, breathe, ask your soul, is this mine? And if it isn't, release it with love. You weren't meant to be a container for collective pain. You were meant to transmute it into wisdom. That is the sacred work of the spiritually awakened, the ones who see what others can't, and carry what others won't, but are now learning to let go and come home to themselves. If this resonates with your experience feeling everything, even when it's not yours, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep uncovering the hidden layers of Jungian wisdom together. 4. You live split between personas. You wear 1,000 faces just to survive, one for work, one for family, another for friends, and yet none of them truly reflect who you are. These masks, crafted out of necessity, begin as protection, but soon become prisons. You tell yourself it's normal. It's just how life is. But deep down, you feel it. The soul-deep exhaustion that no amount of rest can heal. The aching sense of disconnection, even in a room full of people. The anxiety that creeps in during silence, and the sadness that won't name itself. You're not mentally ill. You're spiritually fragmented. Carl Jung understood this deeply when he said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." Because to face your soul means removing the very masks that kept you safe, that one you love, that made you acceptable in a world that rewards conformity and punishes authenticity. But the cost of keeping those masks on is your life force. Your fatigue isn't laziness, it's the exhaustion of carrying false versions of yourself. Your anxiety isn't a disorder, it's the soul's rebellion against betrayal. Your sadness isn't weakness, it's a sacred mourning for the parts of yourself you were forced to abandon just to be tolerated. The world taught you to fragment your being in order to function, but never taught you how to gather your soul back. And now, you find yourself craving something deeper, wholeness, integration, not just functioning, but actually living. You start noticing the disconnect between how you act and what you feel, how you speak and what you truly believe. You realize the real pain isn't in being too much, it's in shrinking just to fit into spaces never meant for the fullness of your soul. This is the spiritual crisis of our age. Not a lack of success or love, but a lack of soul alignment. And the healing isn't found in fixing yourself because you were never broken. It's found in remembering who you were before you learned to perform. In reclaiming the emotions you were told were too much. In honoring the sensitivity that others mocked. In allowing yourself to show up fully and truthfully, even when it's uncomfortable. The soul doesn't want perfection, it wants presence. It wants the truth. And the moment you stop apologizing for your depth, for your insight, for your intuitive knowing, you begin to feel something return your power. Because you were never meant to live split. You were meant to live whole. And that wholeness, that sacred integration of all your parts, is the most spiritual act of rebellion in a world addicted to the surface. 5. You recognize rare souls instantly. You recognize them the moment they enter the room, not because of how they look, but because your soul feels it first. There's no need for words or explanations, only that unmistakable resonance that Carl Jung would have described as a profound psychic alignment between two inner worlds. It's not just chemistry, it's a meeting of frequencies, a mirror to your own soul, and it changes everything. Suddenly, the shallow small talk you once tolerated becomes unbearable. The friendships that used to feel safe now seem suffocating. You begin to see through the illusions, the smiles that hide pain, the laughter that echoes loneliness, the routines that numb the soul. This is the hidden cost of soul recognition. Once you've seen what real energetic alignment feels like, it becomes impossible to pretend that anything less is enough. A woman I spoke to once described this perfectly. She spent years building a life that made sense on the outside. Good job, good friends, good routines. But inside, she always felt misplaced. Like an outsider, watching life happen from the sidelines. Then, one day, during a casual meeting at a bookstore, she locked eyes with someone and felt a silence she had never known. A silence that didn't feel empty, but full. That brief encounter didn't lead to a love story. but it awakened something far more powerful: the truth of how disconnected she had been from her own essence. Jung would say this was a moment of individuation, the moment the unconscious delivers a jolt of self-recognition through another being. And here's where the real transformation begins. It's not about clinging to that person or recreating that experience. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself that came alive in their presence. That kind of resonance is not meant to become an addiction or obsession. It's meant to be a revelation. A soul-aligned connection is like lightning. It cracks the illusion and shows you what's real. But once that light touches you, the shadows in your life become too obvious to ignore. You'll start noticing how much of your life is built on performance, not presence, on fitting in, not belonging. You may feel isolated after the encounter, but you are not broken. You are being recalibrated to a higher frequency. Carl Jung warned that such awakenings often come with suffering because the soul must dismantle the false self to return to authenticity. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign you've lost something. It's a sign that your soul has remembered something essential. So when that rare connection shows up, let it do its sacred work, not to tether you to another, but to reintroduce you to yourself. Let it remind you of your depth, your intuition, your unspoken wisdom. Let it fuel your courage to walk away from anything that dims your light. The real gift isn't in finding another who sees you. It's in finally seeing yourself clearly, without compromise. Did this resonate with you? If so, comment "soul recognition" below. Let's keep exploring the power of rare connections together. And if this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of spiritual insight. 6. You carry a purpose too big for one life. You carry a purpose too big for one life, not a job, not a career, but a spiritual assignment that echoes beyond time. This isn't about chasing status or collecting trophies the world hands out. It's about becoming a living bridge, a vessel for healing, a light in the collective darkness. You were not born to impress the world, but to awaken it. And that calling cannot be fulfilled while you're still hiding behind who you think you're supposed to be. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that becoming starts when you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain your soul. You see things others miss: sorrow behind smiles, fear behind ambition, truth buried beneath performance. And while that vision isolates you, it also confirms your role as a carrier of deeper wisdom. You were given this awareness not to suffer in silence, but to help others remember their own spiritual truth. Yet the cost of this vision is real: loneliness, misunderstanding, emotional heaviness, and the constant burden of knowing too much in a world that praises ignorance. It's easy to doubt yourself, to wonder why you feel so disconnected. But it's not because you're broken, it's because you're awake. And in a sleeping world, wakefulness can feel like exile. But exile is often the birthplace of transformation. You can't fulfill a cosmic assignment by playing small or making yourself digestible for people who haven't yet met themselves. Your light irritates their wounds, not because you intend to, but because you illuminate what they've tried to bury. That's part of the assignment too. Healing the collective begins with healing yourself, integrating the shadow, owning the intuition, reclaiming the parts of you that were exiled to survive. You weren't made to be liked. You were made to be real. And being real means shedding roles, masks, and illusions. There's no spiritual blueprint to follow except the one your soul whispers when you're silent enough to listen. Every time you apologize for your depth, you delay the impact your presence was designed to make. You are not here to be normal. You are here to be necessary. Jung taught that healing comes from integration, not escape from facing what lives inside us and using it to shape the outer world. So if your presence shakes people, let it. If your truth triggers discomfort, so be it. You are not here to fit. You are here to shift. The people who need your light will find it once you stop dimming it for those who don't. 7. Your deepest wound is your greatest gift. They told you to move on, to forget, to stop feeling so deeply. But your soul refused because your deepest wound was never meant to be buried. It was meant to be honored. The pain that nearly broke you open is the very source of your strength. And what once shattered your sense of safety has now given you the spiritual eyes to see beyond illusion. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And you now understand why. The wound didn't just teach you empathy, it gave you the blueprint for transformation. It didn't make you weak, it made you aware. While others are still chasing validation, you've become a silent observer, seeing through masks, hearing the truth behind the words, and sensing what others pretend not to feel. And that is the hidden cost of seeing what others can't. You become the one who stands apart, the one who speaks the language of the soul while the world remains addicted to noise. You smile less, but feel more. You don't need to speak to be understood by the right people anymore. You've entered a realm of inner knowing that few dare to reach, and with that comes sacred loneliness, a quiet mourning for the version of you that once needed to belong. But now, you belong to the truth. The wound, instead of being your weakness, has become your compass, guiding you toward your purpose. It made you magnetic to those searching for light and threatening to those still hiding in the dark. And that's why your presence shifts the room. Not because you try, but because your soul remembers what it took to survive. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow, not running from it. You are not just a survivor. You are a mirror, and those who can't face themselves will run from your reflection. But don't close your heart to avoid being misunderstood. What hurt you most became your offering, a sacred initiation into wisdom no book could teach. The loneliness you feel now is not emptiness, it's spiritual clarity, the silence after the storm, the stillness of becoming. While the world rewards performance, your soul values presence. And because of that, you walk with a quiet power, a soft strength that radiates without needing to explain itself. You now understand that your life is not about erasing the wound, but embodying the wisdom it gave you. You were never broken, only being refined into someone who could lead others through the dark. This is the price of spiritual vision, but it is also a blessing. If this message speaks to your soul and you're ready to turn your deepest wound into your greatest strength, comment, "I honor my pain," below. Your journey matters, and your story can inspire others. Let us know if this resonated. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep growing with us. Thank you for joining us on this deep journey into the hidden cost of seeing what others can't. As Carl Jung reminded us, True awareness often comes with a price: loneliness, misunderstanding, and the weight of perception. But within that burden lies a rare gift: the ability to see the soul of the world and awaken to a deeper truth. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself like this video. Share it with someone who might need this wisdom today, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights that illuminate the unseen. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. They were never your friend. Carl Jung's dark truth about human connection. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. In this video, we're going to explore one of Carl Jung's most unsettling insights: the hidden truth behind human connection, and why some people you once called a friend may never have been one at all. What if the warm smiles and kind words you've trusted were actually masks? What if genuine friendship is far rarer than we think? Not because others are always bad, but because most of us haven't even met our true selves. Jung's discovery of the persona reveals how we all wear psychological masks to fit in, often hiding unconscious motives, not just from others, but from ourselves. Before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you once trusted completely? Do you think we ever truly know someone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Let's begin this powerful journey into the shadowy side of friendship, self-awareness, and spiritual growth. 1. The persona, the mask that blocks real connection. We live in a world where connections are everywhere: social media, friends, workplace acquaintances, neighbors we nod to, but very few of these are real. In fact, most of the time, the people around you aren't related to you at all. They're interacting with the mask you wear, and you're doing the same to them. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, and understanding it is not just psychological, it's spiritual. Because real connection only begins when the mask falls away. And until that moment, the loneliness you feel in a room full of people is not an illusion. It's a spiritual awakening, a signal that your soul is craving authenticity in a world addicted to performance. The persona, according to Jung, is not evil. It's necessary for navigating society. But the danger arises when we forget it's a mask. Men, especially in the 30 to 65 age range, often wear their personas like armor. The strong provider at work, the agreeable husband at home, the stoic friend who never complains. We are taught early on that vulnerability equals weakness, so we hide our fear, our pain, our dreams, and even our joy behind socially acceptable faces. Over time, these masks harden into our identities. We start believing the act we're putting on. And worse, others do too. So instead of bonding from soul to soul, we bond mask to mask, role to role. We don't form friendships, we form rehearsals. The people we think we're close to often have no idea who we truly are beneath the surface. This creates a deep spiritual fracture that modern life only amplifies. In a culture obsessed with appearances, hustle, and control, the invitation to drop the mask feels risky. But the truth is, real connection cannot happen without risk. It demands exposure, vulnerability, and honesty. It demands that we stop performing and start being. Yet most relationships never reach that level, because most people aren't ready to meet you without their mask on. This is why betrayal cuts so deep. It isn't just the loss of a person, it's the collapse of a carefully curated illusion. And when someone walks away, you're often not losing a friend. You're losing a mirror that only reflects your persona, not your essence. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that journey is lonely, because not everyone will walk with you once you start removing your disguise. But that loneliness is not your enemy. It is the path. It is the spiritual fire. It burns away the false so that your soul can rise to the truth. So how do you live this truth in modern life? First, stop confusing attention with intimacy. Just because someone speaks to you every day does not mean they see you. Second, observe when you change who you are, depending on your environment. That is when your personality takes over. Third, find spaces where you can speak from your soul without fear of rejection. This is where spiritual friendships flourish. And finally, understand that not everyone is capable of meeting you where you are. Some people are just born to know the mask, and that is okay. You are not a failure. You have evolved. In this spiritual awakening, you learn that you are not here to fit in. You are here to be seen. And those who are meant for you will never ask you to be anything other than who you truly are. So take the risk. Take off the mask. And in doing so, invite connection that is not only authentic, but sacred. Comment below, I am awakened. 2. The shadow, the denied self that sabotages relationships. They say real friendship is built on authenticity. But have you ever wondered why some connections just feel off? Like no matter how much you give, something's missing. Carl Jung believed that many relationships crumble not because of what's said, but because of what's hidden. He called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, bury, and refuse to own. These are not just the ugly emotions like anger, envy, or insecurity, but also the radiant qualities we're secretly ashamed of, like our drive, confidence, or deep sense of self-worth. In the name of politeness or spiritual performance, people push these parts down to protect their image. But what Jung warned us about is this: whatever you reject in yourself doesn't disappear, it gets projected. So when someone can't admit they're jealous, they accuse you of arrogance. When they can't face their own neediness, they call you too much. And in this toxic projection loop, authentic connection dies. You're not building a friendship, you're becoming a mirror for someone else's unresolved wounds. This happens all the time, especially in modern friendships, where branding your identity is often more important than being real. Think about social media. People curate every moment, filtering their lives until there's no shadow left, only light. But you can't form a soul-level connection when all you're allowed to see is someone's highlight reel. In the name of positivity and fake harmony, people avoid conflict, dodge honesty, and smile through betrayal. But can there be real trust without truth? Can there be a deep connection without showing the broken, vulnerable parts too? You may have had friendships where you felt you couldn't show your pain or your power because it would make others uncomfortable. That's not spiritual growth. That's a spiritual performance. I knew someone who always seemed kind and spiritual on the surface, always posting quotes about love and light. But whenever I achieved something, they would go silent. No congratulations, no support. And when I opened up about challenges, they'd redirect the conversation or make it about them. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too intense, too emotional. But later, I realized it wasn't me. They were at war with their own shadow. My confidence triggered their insecurity. My vulnerability exposed their emotional avoidance. That's when I understood. Not everyone in your circle is your friend. Some people only connect with your wounds, not your wholeness. So ask yourself, who are the people in your life that can handle both your pain and your power? Who celebrates your growth without envy? Who stays when you're messy, not just when you're shining? Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." True spirituality is not about pretending to be above human emotion. It's about integrating it. And spiritual growth begins when we stop projecting and start owning. So the next time a friendship feels off, ask, is this person really seeing me? Or are they just seeing their shadow? The message is simple but powerful. True friendship begins where the mask ends. To grow spiritually, you must be brave enough to see your own darkness and gentle enough to make room for the darkness of others. Are you willing to do that? Are they willing? Because if they aren't, they will never be your friends. If you are, comment below, "I am willing." 3. Projection. Why we don't see others clearly. When you think someone is your friend, are they truly showing up for who you are or who they need you to be? This is one of the most confronting questions Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom asks us to sit with. At the heart of his teachings lies the shadowy mechanism of projection, and it's likely been quietly shaping your relationships more than you realize. Jung believed that much of what we call connection is actually a mirror of our own unconscious mind. That means the friend you adored may have simply been reflecting back a part of you that needed healing, validation, or love. And when that illusion cracks, we don't just feel let down, we feel betrayed. Why? Because we weren't really relating to them. We were relating to an image we created in our own mind, built from our unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and disowned traits. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Isn't that what we often do in relationships? We call it fate when someone enters our life and makes us feel seen. But were they seeing us, or were we just seeing ourselves in them? This is the painful truth many avoid. Projection is one of the most powerful, yet invisible forces in human connection. You project your longing for emotional safety, belonging, or parental love onto someone, and suddenly they seem like the perfect friend or partner. But it's not them you're loving. It's the comfort of what they represent. This is why relationships built on projection often start with obsession and end in disillusionment. One day, they do something that shatters the fantasy. Maybe they didn't text back fast enough. Maybe they failed to meet an expectation you never voiced, and suddenly the illusion falls apart. You're not just disappointed, you're devastated. Not because they betrayed you, but because the emotional mirror you clung to no longer reflects what you need it to. Have you ever wondered why some people trigger extreme emotions in you while others feel neutral? That's often projection at work. Either they carry a shadow you haven't integrated, or they awaken a need you've buried. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom teaches us that the more unaware we are of our own inner landscape, the more we use others as emotional canvases. Instead of truly seeing people for who they are, we unknowingly reduce them to roles in our own psychic drama: caretaker, betrayer, savior, enemy. So what happens when we stop projecting? We start connecting. When you reclaim the parts of yourself, you've exiled your anger, your fear, your tenderness. You no longer need someone else to hold them for you. This is where authentic friendship begins. It's not built on neediness, but on presence. It's not about finding someone to complete you, but being whole enough to meet another soul as they are. Can you look at the people in your life right now and say with honesty, I see them clearly? Or are you still chasing ghosts of your childhood, shadows of your past, or echoes of your pain? The invitation here is not to blame others for failing to be who we wanted them to be, but to awaken to the truth of how we distort connection to avoid facing ourselves. Spiritual wisdom isn't always soft. It often demands brutal honesty with our own illusions. So, what do you do with this awareness? You pause before you idealize someone. You ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them? You embrace solitude not as loneliness, but as a sacred space for integration. Because only when we stop demanding others carry the weight of our unconsciousness can we start forming relationships rooted in truth, not fantasy. And that's the spiritual awakening Jung pointed us toward, not a life free of pain, but a life rich with self-awareness, depth, and genuine human connection. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. The collective, unconscious, archetypes that control us. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But what if none of those people truly know you at all? In the world of modern connection, Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious is not just theory. It's a lens through which we begin to see the hidden scripts that run our friendships, partnerships, and even our sense of self. According to Jung, beneath the surface of our conscious interactions lies a vast reservoir of shared symbols, images, and roles that we unknowingly inherit, what he called archetypes. These archetypes shape us long before we realize it. We don't just make friends. We often cast people into roles without even knowing it. The hero who will save us, the caregiver who will soothe us, the victim who will make us feel needed, or the trickster who brings chaos. These roles are not chosen from the heart. They are inherited patterns acting through us, subtly dictating how we relate. And here's the dark truth. Most friendships are not formed on the basis of seeing one another as whole, evolving, spiritual beings. They're formed because someone fits neatly into a familiar psychological role that confirms our unconscious expectations. Jung warned that this kind of connection creates conformity, not authenticity. You may think you're being accepted, but you're being assigned. This isn't friendship, it's projection. So many men live out these archetypal friendships for decades, mistaking loyalty for real connection and camaraderie for truth, only to wake up in midlife with a gnawing emptiness they can't explain. This awakening, while painful, can become the beginning of something powerful, a spiritual awakening that calls you to look beyond the mask you wear and the roles you cast others in. So what does this mean in modern life? It means that when a friend disappoints you, it might not be betrayal. It might be the collapse of an illusion. It means that when you feel unseen or misunderstood, you're likely not even relating to them from your real self, nor are they. The spiritual path demands that we break these archetypal chains and begin to see people not as roles, but as reflections of their own inner journeys. It's no longer enough to be the hero in someone's story or the stoic in your own. It's time to ask, who am I outside of the roles I've always played? And who are the people around me when I stop assigning them scripts? Carl Jung once said, "Until you become conscious of your unconscious, it will guide your life and you will call it destiny." True friendship begins where projection ends. It begins when you dare to meet a person not as a symbol, but as a soul. As you begin to decipher these psychological patterns, look not just outward, but inward. Reflect on the friendships you have today. Are they spiritual anchors or unconscious echoes of the past? On your journey of spiritual awakening, be mindful of who you allow into your sacred space. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of who you are. Only those who see you, not the role you play, are worthy of walking beside you. Comment below. I choose the right person. 5. Mutual deception. Why intimacy is so rare. Most people walk through life wearing masks, not the physical kind, but emotional and psychological ones crafted from childhood conditioning, social expectations, and a fear of rejection. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that journey is rarely welcomed in the relationships we think are closest to us. In fact, one of the darkest truths Jung highlighted about human connection is that many of our so-called friendships are built not on truth, but on mutual deception. Two people meet, each unconsciously offering up a carefully curated version of themselves, the successful one, the funny one, the agreeable one, and in return, they expect the same. It's an unspoken agreement. I won't show you my shadows if you don't show me yours. The tragedy is that when one person finally dares to be real, revealing a flaw, a fear, a wound, the entire dynamic becomes threatened. The relationship becomes unstable, not because of dishonesty, but because of truth. And that's when many people pull away, disappear, or emotionally shut down. Let me share a story. A man I once knew had a best friend for nearly 15 years. They shared everything: drinks after work, family holidays, even deep conversations about goals and ambitions. But one day, during a particularly hard period, he confided in this friend about a bout of depression, the kind that makes it hard to get out of bed. Instead of support, his friend grew distant. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped coming. Eventually, they drifted apart. It wasn't because the friendship wasn't real. It was because the mask had come off. And once authenticity entered the room, the illusion of closeness vanished. The connection they had was based on mutual performance, not spiritual truth. So here's the real question. How many people in your life know the real you? Not the smiling version, not the competent version, but the one who struggles, who questions, who grows. And are you willing to accept that some of the people you consider close may not have the capacity or desire to meet you at that level of truth? The reason intimacy is so rare is because it requires both people to be spiritually awake. It asks for vulnerability, for the kind of honesty that goes deeper than words. Real spiritual growth doesn't just happen in solitude. It happens when we show up unmasked and allow others to do the same. But this kind of authenticity is risky, and many fear that being known will lead to being abandoned. So they retreat, and relationships remain shallow, even after decades. What would happen if we stopped performing? if we stopped trying to be what others expected and simply allowed ourselves to be? What kind of world could we create if we valued truth over appearances? Here's the lesson. Spiritual growth demands we confront the masks we wear not just in public, but in our most intimate spaces. If you're on a path of true spirituality, you will inevitably outgrow relationships built on illusion. You may lose people. You may find yourself standing alone. But what you'll gain in return is priceless real connection, emotional freedom, and the rare, sacred experience of being seen as you truly are. So I'll leave you with this. Who are you beneath the mask? And are you brave enough to let someone see? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 6. Psychological addiction to persona and approval. Many people don't realize they're not addicted to people. They're addicted to approval. You see, when Carl Jung spoke of the persona, he wasn't talking about a mask you wear just to trick others. He was talking about the psychological costume you put on every day to survive at work, in social settings, even in relationships. Over time, the approval you receive from others for wearing that mask becomes addictive. It's not just about being liked. It's about being validated for a version of yourself that isn't even real. And that's where the danger begins. The more approval you get for being someone you're not, the harder it becomes to show up as who you truly are. You might even begin to fear that your real self won't be accepted at all. That's why so many people keep performing, stuck in roles they never consciously chose, living a life that feels increasingly hollow. Jung called this a form of spiritual emptiness, a deep inner loneliness that persists even when you're surrounded by people. Why? Because those connections aren't rooted in truth. They're built on illusion. You're not being loved for who you are. You're being liked for who you pretend to be. Have you ever walked away from a gathering feeling drained, even though everyone seemed to enjoy your company? That's a sign your soul is exhausted from playing a part. And it's not just emotional exhaustion, it's a spiritual wound. Because when the soul is not seen, it suffers. In Jungian terms, when we become overly identified with the persona, we lose touch with the self, our deeper, authentic identity. The result is a kind of spiritual disconnection, a silent crisis of meaning. As Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how many people actually give themselves that permission? Instead, they chase applause, conform to expectations, and abandon the one person who truly matters, their inner self. And it doesn't stop there. When you surround yourself with people who only love the mask, what happens the moment you take it off? Will they stay or will they leave? That's the terrifying truth many avoid. So ask yourself, are your connections feeding your soul or feeding your image? Are you building relationships based on your truth or maintaining ones that require you to hide? The difference is everything. Spiritual wisdom invites you to walk away from relationships that reward your silence and step into spaces where your truth is welcomed, even if that means walking alone for a while. Because solitude with truth is better than a company built on lies. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that the most dangerous form of abandonment is self-abandonment. So next time you feel the urge to perform, to edit yourself, to play the part, pause, breathe, and ask, who am I trying to be right now? And why? That question alone can open the door to a more authentic, soul-nourishing life. 7. Archetypal traps in group dynamics. Have you ever stepped into a room and, without saying a word, found yourself being labeled, boxed in, or expected to play a role that you never signed up for? Carl Jung's profound understanding of the psyche revealed that in every group, whether it's your circle of friends, your team at work, or even your family, archetypal roles silently and unconsciously begin to emerge. Someone becomes the leader, someone the clown, someone the fixer, and someone often unfairly the scapegoat. These roles are not the result of conscious choice or mutual agreement. Rather, they arise from what Jung called the collective unconscious, the inherited patterns of human experience. And the dark truth? Most friendships are not rooted in genuine emotional connection or shared values, but are unconsciously governed by these psychological blueprints. As painful as it may be to accept, sometimes you weren't loved for who you are. You were merely needed for the role you unconsciously agreed to play. This is where the spiritual journey begins, not in blaming others, but in recognizing the patterns that have silently shaped your relationships. If you've ever felt like you were giving too much, always fixing others' messes, or being treated as the emotional punching bag, chances are you've been cast in a role that served others' comfort but betrayed your own truth. This isn't just about personality. This is about archetypes, deeply embedded patterns that play out in every social structure unless you wake up to them. And this spiritual awakening isn't some mystical detachment from the world. It is the gritty, sobering process of seeing through the illusion of connection and reclaiming your authentic self. Jung warned us not to confuse belonging with being seen. One can be surrounded by people and still remain profoundly unseen. That's because the group often doesn't see you. They see the version of you that best suits their needs. The fixer, so they can avoid fixing themselves. The scapegoat, so they don't have to face their own shame. The leader, so they can avoid responsibility. The moment you try to step out of that role, the group may resist, turn on you, or accuse you of changing. But is it really a change, or simply a return to who you were before the mask? This is why spiritual strength isn't measured by how many people love you. It's measured by how deeply you love yourself, enough to leave places where your soul is not honored. In modern life, this looks like walking away from the friend who only calls when they need something. It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like no longer playing the role of savior, peacemaker, or emotional dumping ground. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege demands that you see where you've been unconsciously manipulated into a role and choose instead to be a whole person. So let me ask you this. In the groups you are in, do you feel seen or simply used? Are your relationships built on mutual respect? Or are they constrained by silent roles that make you feel small? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are essential. Because the moment you begin to answer them with brutal honesty, you will begin a true spiritual awakening, not one that seeks to escape reality, but one that empowers you to transform it. And as you peel back the layers, you may realize that some of the people you once called friends were not really friends. They were just characters in a play you never auditioned for. True connection can only begin when the play is over. Comment below. I choose the right friend. 8. True friendship requires conscious inner work. When Carl Jung said that true friendship requires intense psychological effort, he wasn't exaggerating. He meant that unless you've done the hard inner work of shadow integration, pulling back your projections, and becoming aware of the deep archetypal patterns that drive your behavior, then what you call friendship may be nothing more than a house of mirrors. You're seeing people not as they truly are, but through the lens of your unmet needs, childhood wounds, and unconscious expectations. And the same is happening in reverse. Think about that for a second. If you've never shown your real self to anyone, and no one has truly shown theirs to you, have you ever actually had a friend? That question might be uncomfortable, but it's meant to wake you up. It's meant to confront you with a spiritual truth that most people avoid their entire lives. You see, spirituality isn't just about transcending this world. It's about becoming so present and real within it that your connections stop being performative and start becoming transformational. True friendship isn't about surface-level bonding or convenience. It's about two people who have walked through their own shadows, faced their pain, and can sit together in mutual honesty, without masks, without games. Think about how many of your relationships were built on roles you played: the helper, the achiever, the funny one, the responsible one, and in return, they projected their own needs onto you. Maybe you were never really seen, only used, and you probably did the same to others without even realizing it. We all do this until we begin to awaken. That's where spiritual growth begins, not in seeking more people to love us, but in learning how to see clearly and love consciously. In modern life, this lesson hits especially hard. You could have thousands of followers, hundreds of contacts, a buzzing phone, and still feel deeply alone. Why? Because without this inner work, your relationships are just echoes. I once knew a man who was the life of every party, always surrounded, always laughing. But one day, he broke down and admitted he didn't know if anyone truly knew him or if he even knew himself. His whole social life was a mask, and behind it, he was starving for depth. That's the reality for many. So I want to ask you, how many people in your life truly see you? And do you even let them? When was the last time you sat with someone and let yourself be fully human, flawed, messy, and honest without performing, pleasing, or hiding? That is where real friendship begins. That is where connection becomes sacred. And this is why spiritual growth isn't optional. If you want real relationships, it's essential. The lesson is simple, but not easy. You have to do your inner work. You have to know your own darkness if you want to meet someone else's light. True friendship isn't given. It's created through the fire of self-awareness. So next time you call someone your friend, ask yourself, not, do they like me, but do they see me? And even more importantly, am I showing up as my true self? Because only in that space, where nothing is hidden, can friendship become the healing force it was always meant to be. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored today, Carl Jung's profound insight into human connection reveals a haunting truth that many of the relationships we believe to be genuine are often projections of unresolved psychological material. If those around you are only seeing a version of you, shaped by their own inner wounds, then real connection becomes nearly impossible. At Spiritual Wisdom, we invite you to reflect deeply. Are your friendships rooted in truth or illusion? Begin by seeing yourself clearly. Only then can others truly see you. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt unseen or misunderstood by those closest to you? Let's start a conversation that matters if your story might be the light someone else needs today.